I walked into the glass chapel clutching a thin envelope, my cream maternity dress a target for every eye. "Are you here for diaper money?" Sloane whispered. Grant grabbed the lace over my belly and ripped it with a savage jerk. The sound of tearing fabric silenced the 100 guests. "You always loved playing the victim." He smirked. He thought he humiliated me, but he just triggered his own destruction. "My name is Madeline Carver. I am 33 years old, and as I pushed open the heavy, arched doors of the Cascadia Glass Chapel on the outskirts of Seattle, I felt every bit of that age. The late autumn sun bled through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls, making the entire room look like a polished diamond, sharp and blinding. I was 8 months pregnant, my body heavy and aching, dressed in a simple cream maternity gown that felt like a shroud of mourning rather than a celebration. In my hand, I gripped a thin white envelope. It wasn't a wedding gift. The air in the chapel shifted the moment I stepped onto the plush white carpet. It was that distinct, suffocating silence that happens when the social fabric of a room suddenly snaps. I was the typo in their golden embossed invitations, the pregnant ex-wife appearing at the exact moment the groom, Grant Halston, was preparing to exchange vows with his new life. I watched Grant at the altar. He was taller than I remembered, his tuxedo fitting his frame with the kind of precision only old money can buy. Beside him stood Sloane Whitaker, a famous influencer whose life was a series of curated filters and sponsored content. She looked like a porcelain doll in $30,000 worth of white silk. As I walked down the aisle, the guests turned their heads in a slow, synchronized wave of judgment. I could feel their eyes scanning my modest dress, my tired face, and my swollen belly. Sloane didn't panic. She was a professional. She waited until I was within a few feet of the altar before she stepped forward. She moved with a practiced grace, her smile as sharp and cold as a surgical blade. She leaned in close, her cloying perfume hitting me like a physical blow. She didn't realize, or perhaps she didn't care, that her lapel microphone was still live, broadcasting her voice to the entire congregation. "Are you here?" "For diaper money," she whispered, her voice dripping with enough venom to kill a garden. "Or did you just want one last look at a man you couldn't keep?" Grant didn't flinch. He didn't look at me with regret or even anger. He looked at me the way an executive looks at a delivery driver who has walked into the wrong boardroom. He reached out, his fingers digging into the flesh of my arm, and pulled me toward the center of the aisle. He wanted the cameras to see. He wanted to highlight the contrast between my plainness and their perfection for the 10 million followers watching their live stream. I heard the frantic clicks of smartphones. The room was a sea of blue light as guests leaned in to capture the real-life drama. The wedding music continued to swell, a jaunty, mocking orchestral piece that seemed to laugh at the frantic thumping of my heart. "Madeline," Grant said, his voice projected for the front rows. He wore a mask of fake concern. "I know this is difficult for you. I know you're struggling, but you can't be here." He leaned down as if to offer a comforting embrace, but as he moved, his hand caught the delicate lace shroud covering my belly. His eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw the true monster beneath the polished exterior. He gripped the fabric and yanked it with a sudden, violent force. The sound of tearing fabric was loud, a jagged, guttural rasp that silenced the music and the whispers. A long strip of my dress hung limp, exposing the pale fabric beneath. The entire chapel took a collective, horrified breath. I didn't scream. I didn't fall. My hands flew to my stomach in a primal reflex of protection, and I stood perfectly still, counting my heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Grant leaned in closer, his breath hot against my ear. "You always love playing the victim, don't you?" "Maddie," he hissed, a triumphant glint in his eyes. "Now give the people what they want and crawl away." A panicked event manager started to rush toward us, but his path was suddenly blocked by a man who seemed to materialize out of the shadows. He was broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal black suit and a discreet earpiece. He stood in front of me like a wall of reinforced steel, his presence commanding the space. He didn't look at the groom. He didn't look at the bride. He inclined his head toward me. "Ms. Carver," the man said, his voice echoing through the dead silence of the chapel. "The executive suite is ready. The board is waiting for your signature." Grant froze. The smug, victorious smirk on his face evaporated, replaced by a confusion that rapidly turned into a sickly, pale terror. He looked at the man in the suit, then back at me. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't look at Grant as the man who had broken my heart. I looked at him as a creditor, looks at a bankrupt account that has finally come due. I reached out and adjusted the torn lace of my dress with a steady hand. I looked Grant directly in the eye, watching as his world began to tilt on its axis. "Let's rewind to this morning," I said quietly. The morning began at 8 in our townhouse in Queen Anne, a place of tall windows and cold marble that had stopped feeling like a home months ago. Grant stood before the mirror, adjusting his silver cufflinks with the practiced ease of a man who believed he was untouchable. He didn't look at me, even as I sat at the kitchen island, nursing a lukewarm cup of decaf. "Madeline, did you hear me? I need you to wire that $95,000 for the North Bay renovations deposit by 10 this morning," Grant said, his voice flat and demanding. "The contractors won't start the work on the new estate without the liquid capital up front." I am searching my inbox for the invoice now. "Just a minute," I replied, my fingers hovering over the laptop keys. In my head, the pieces clicked together with a sickening mechanical precision. North Bay Renovations Limited Liability Company didn't exist on any construction registry. It was a shell, a hollow vessel Grant had been using to siphon money from the project funds he managed. He wasn't building an estate. He was building a golden parachute for his life with Sloane. My phone vibrated on the counter. It was Marjorie Halston, my soon-to-be former mother-in-law. I picked up, bracing myself for the cold. "Listen to me very carefully." "Madeline," Marjorie's voice crackled through the speaker, sharp and brittle. "Do not, I repeat, do not make a fool of yourself or this family today. Dress modestly. Keep your mouth shut. And really, getting pregnant now. After all these years, you finally manage it when the marriage is already dead. How incredibly typical of you to try and trap him. I understand, Marjorie," I said, my voice a hollowed-out version of itself. I wouldn't want to ruin the image. I hung up and waited until I heard Grant's car pull out of the driveway. Then I moved. I walked into the dressing room and knelt before the small floor safe hidden behind a row of heavy winter coats. The code wasn't Grant's birthday or our anniversary. It was the date I had quietly established the Carver Atlas Trust, years before I ever said "I do" to a Halston. I pulled out my burner phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Eli, it is time," I said when the line picked up. "Activate plan glass line. We are ready." "Madeline." "Eli Mercer, my lead counsel," replied. His voice was the only thing that felt solid in my world. "Graham is already in position at the estate. We have the digital locks ready for the company's financial systems. Once you give the signal, Grant will be frozen out of every account bearing the Halston name. I want the transfer history from the last 6 months verified," I added, my heart beginning to race. "And I need the list of Sloane's shadow accounts. I know she's been using bot farms in Miami to inflate her engagement for the wedding sponsors. I want the receipts." "Consider it done," Eli said. "And Madeline, be careful. He's desperate." I ended the call and walked back to the kitchen. On the refrigerator, a single ultrasound photo was pinned under a magnet. It wasn't a prop for a drama. It was the reason I was still standing. I touched the grainy image of the life growing inside me, a silent promise forming in my chest. I would not let this child be born into a world of lies and humiliation. I went to my closet and pulled out the dress I had prepared. It was a cream-colored maternity gown, beautiful and simple, but with a secret. The outer lace shroud had been meticulously altered with a single, temporary thread along the side seam. It was designed to tear with the slightest aggressive pull. I tucked a tiny, high-definition digital recorder into the waistband, a device legal under Washington's one-party consent laws for recording private conversations where I was a participant. Finally, I placed the thin envelope containing the legal addendums for the wedding venue into my purse. I sent a short text to Grant. I will stop by the chapel to drop off the papers you need to sign before the ceremony. His reply came seconds later. Fine, don't cause trouble. Just give them to the planner and stay out of the way. I took a long, steady breath, feeling the cool Seattle air fill my lungs. I wasn't going there to beg or to cry. I was going to let them perform their own execution. I would give them the stage, the audience, and the lighting. I would let them be as cruel as they wanted to be, and I would make sure every second of it was captured in 4K resolution. Because in the age of the influencer, there is nothing more permanent than the truth when it goes viral. Astor Hollow Estate felt less like a wedding venue and more like a fortress of vanity. Nestled deep within the evergreen forests outside of Seattle, the compound featured its own helipad and a security detail that required every guest to sign a non-disclosure agreement before they were even allowed past the iron gates. It was the height of luxury, a place where privacy was the most expensive item on the menu, and tonight, every inch of it was being sold to the highest bidder on social media. I didn't enter through the main foyer where the champagne was flowing. Instead, I chose a side entrance meant for the catering staff, my footsteps muffled by the industrial flooring, behind a rack of steamed silk robes in the hallway. I stopped. 2 bridesmaids, dressed in champagne satin, were huddled together, their voices hushed but sharp with gossip. "Can you believe she actually showed up?" the first one whispered. "Grant told everyone she was coming to apologize and give them her blessing. He said she was desperate to make things right before the baby comes." "She looks like a disaster," the other replied, stifling a laugh. "Sloane is going to eat her alive. On the live stream, it is going to be the most viewed segment of the whole year." I moved past them before they could see the look in my eyes. Near the dressing rooms, a young wedding planner with a frantic expression and a headset spotted me. She looked at my belly, then at her digital clipboard, her eyes filling with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. "You must be Madeline," she said, handing me a silver family guest wristband. "Sloane specifically added you to the VIP list. She said it was important for the narrative of the day." I slipped the band onto my wrist, the plastic digging into my skin. Sloane hadn't invited me out of kindness. I was a prop, a foil to her perfection. The bitter X meant to make her look like a saint. I found myself in the backstage corridor just as Sloane was finishing a live segment for her followers. She stood under a ring light that made her skin look like airbrushed marble, her 3-carat diamond flashing in the artificial glow. She was the star of the dream wedding, and she knew exactly where every camera was positioned. As she turned, she saw me standing in the shadows and deliberately panned her phone toward me, a predatory glint in her eyes. "Oh, look who made it, guys," Sloane cooed into the microphone clipped to her bodice. Her voice projected to thousands of viewers. "The past meeting the future, isn't it? Just so beautiful. When everyone can just get along." Grant appeared from the groom's suite, his smile wide and cinematic for the digital audience. He stepped toward me, placing a hand on my shoulder as if we were old friends, but his grip was like a vice. He leaned in, his voice a low, threatening rumble that didn't reach the microphone. "Stand where I told you," he hissed, his eyes devoid of any warmth. Don't cry. Don't make a scene. If you ruin the image of this day, I will make sure you never see a cent of that settlement money." I looked past him, scanning the room. Scattered throughout the estate were men in charcoal suits who didn't quite fit the typical wedding security mold. They weren't the ones Grant had hired from the local agency. These men were positioned at the exits and near the server rooms with a different kind of authority. They were here on behalf of the contract holder of Astor Hollow, the person who had actually paid the 7-figure booking fee in full. I walked over to the mahogany signing table near the chapel entrance and placed the thin envelope on the silk runner. "What is that?" Grant asked, his eyes darting to the paper. "There is a venue contract addendum in here," I said calmly, looking at the wedding planner rather than him. "Please ensure this is delivered to the authorized representative immediately. It is a matter of legal compliance." Grant's eyes blinked rapidly. I could see the gears turning behind his groomed brow. He had expected me to hand over a tear-stained letter or a desperate demand for child support. The word contract was a foreign language in this setting, and I saw the first flicker of genuine unease cross his face. Before he could reach for the envelope, the ceremonial bells began to chime, echoing through the trees. It was 4 o'clock. The show was starting. Sloane took Grant's arm, her white silk train billowing behind her like a cloud of frozen smoke. They stepped out into the light, greeted by the flash of 100 cameras and the orchestrated cheers of their friends. I walked to the very last row of the chapel and took my seat. I placed my hand over my belly, feeling a faint, rhythmic kick from the life within me. I didn't feel the heat of anger or the sting of betrayal anymore. I felt cold. I felt ready. "Don't win with rage," I whispered to myself as the music began to play. "Win with evidence." The ceremony reached its peak. Grant held the ring, a band of platinum that cost $50,000 of money he didn't technically own. Sloane turned her head, her eyes finding me in the back row with the precision of a heat-seeking missile. "Madeline," she said into her microphone, her voice echoing through the glass chapel. "Please, come forward. We want everyone to see how civilized we can be. A new family shouldn't start with secrets." I walked down the aisle, the weight of 100 judgmental stares pressing against my shoulders. Grant took the microphone from the stand, his smile wide and predatory for the cameras. "I want to thank Madeline for the years we spent together," he said, his voice dripping with a fake, oily gratitude. "But as you can see, she always did have a knack for appearing exactly when she wants attention. I am only here to deliver the papers. Grant," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I don't want anything from you." The crowd scoffed. A woman in the third row whispered delusional loud enough for the guests around her to snicker. They believed his narrative. They saw a bitter, pregnant woman trying to claw back into a life she had lost. Then, the trap was sprung. Sloane reached out as if to guide me, her designer heel catching on the plush carpet in a choreographed stumble. She grabbed my arm, and as I moved to steady her, Grant stepped in. He didn't catch her. Instead, he reached out and snagged the loose edge of the lace shroud covering my belly. With a sharp, practiced jerk, he pulled. The sound of the lace tearing was like a gunshot in the silent chapel. A long, jagged strip of the cream fabric fell away, exposing the simple cotton slip beneath. "Oh my God," Sloane cried out, covering her mouth in mock horror. She turned toward the nearest camera, her face a mask of performative shock. "Madeline, why would you do that to yourself? She's losing it. Everyone. She's attacking us." Flashbulbs exploded in my face. I could see the glowing screens of dozens of phones recording my supposed breakdown. I didn't hide my face. I didn't cry. I stood perfectly still, my hand on my belly, feeling the cool air on my skin where the fabric had once been. "Thank you," I said, my voice low but carrying through the sudden silence. I needed this. Exact behavior. Suddenly, Graham Vale stepped out from behind a marble pillar. He didn't touch Sloane, but he raised a hand, a gesture of absolute authority. Behind him, 3 other men in charcoal suits moved to the streaming stations. "Signal jammed," Graham said, his voice flat. "All recording devices in the private sector are now unauthorized and blocked." The crowd began to murmur in confusion. The wedding planner's earpiece crackled so loudly I could hear the panicked static. Her face turned the color of ash as she looked at her tablet. She stumbled forward, her hands shaking. "Stop! We have to stop!" She stammered into her headset. She looked up at Grant, her voice trembling. "Mr. Halston, the owner of the estate has ordered an immediate halt to the ceremony. There is a critical contractual violation." "What are you talking about?" Grant roared, his polished mask finally cracking. "I paid for this venue. I signed the papers. Get back to the music and finish this." "Now." The planner backed away, shaking her head. A man from the venue's legal team stepped forward, looking Grant in the eye with a gaze as cold as a Seattle winter. "With all due respect," the man said, "you are not the person of authority here. You have no standing to give orders." Grant stepped toward him, his face turning a dark, bruised purple. "I am Grant Halston. I spent $400,000 on this weekend. I am the one paying your salary." I turned to Grant, the silence in the chapel now so thick it felt like water. I let a small, sharp smile touch my lips, the first one I had allowed myself in 3 long years. "You are just a tenant, Grant," I said, my voice cutting through his rage like a knife through silk. "And the lease, the master contract for this entire estate, is in my name." The ceremony was forced into a 15-minute technical delay. Grant and Sloane retreated into the bridal suite, the heavy oak door slamming with a violence that echoed through the glass chapel. Inside, I knew they weren't reeling from the shock of my revelation. They were pivoting. They were influencers. And in their world, a crisis was just an opportunity for a more profitable narrative. My phone buzzed in my palm. Sloane had already uploaded a series of stories to her 3 million followers. The clips were masterfully edited, showing only Graham Vale stepping toward her and the jagged tear in my cream dress. The caption read, "She stood at the altar and demanded money in the middle of our vows." My heart is breaking for our guests who had to see this. Through the thin wall of the prep room, I heard Grant's voice, sharp and frantic. He was on the phone with Callum Raines, the high-priced reputation manager he kept on a secret retainer. "Push the narrative." "Callum!" Grant barked, his voice straining with a desperate edge. She's unstable. Use the pregnancy. Say she's using the baby as a weapon because she can't let go of the Halston name. I want her trending for being a sociopath by the time the reception starts. Beside me in the lobby. Eli Mercer tilted his tablet screen so I could see the live data. A hashtag, Madeline Carver Obsessed, was climbing the Seattle trends at a terrifying speed. "Look at the metadata." "Madeline," Eli whispered, his face grim. 60 to 70% of the accounts posting this were created within the last 48 hours. It's a coordinated bot attack. He's spending thousands of dollars every 10 minutes to bury you under a mountain of fake outrage. A notification popped up from a local podcast, Emerald City Insider. They had just released a breaking analysis clip titled "The Psychology of the Toxic Ex." The host was speaking about me as if I were a case study in a textbook. I checked the upload time and felt a chill. The thumbnail and the graphics had been prepared days ago. They hadn't just reacted to the wedding. They had scripted my public execution before I even stepped into the chapel. My personal phone vibrated with a direct text from Grant. If you dare make a bigger scene, I will release everything. The photos from the summer in Maui. Every private email you ever sent when you were weak. I will strip you of every ounce of dignity you have left in this city." He was talking about the vulnerability folders he had compiled during our marriage moments of grief, private medical struggles and insecurities I had shared in the sacred safety of our bed. He thought he could blackmail me with my own humanity. Don't reply. I told Eli, my voice flat and devoid of the fear Grant expected. I want our team to record every single ad transaction, track every PR payment and every email sent to these media outlets. I want the digital paper trail of this character assassination. Every cent he spends on bots is a cent he is stealing from his creditors. My watch alerted me to an incoming call from Dr. Hannah Pierce, my obstetrician. I stepped into a quiet corner of the lobby to answer. Madeline, I'm seeing your vitals through the remote monitor, Dr. Pierce said, her voice laced with professional concern. Your heart rate is spiking. The baby is stable. But you need to breathe. You must avoid this kind of stress. Or I will have to insist you come into the clinic immediately. I am fine. Hannah, I replied, my voice trembling slightly as I felt a sharp, rhythmic kick against my ribs. I am going to end this quickly, and I'm going to do it the cleanest way possible. Just give me 1 hour, please, she urged. Just get out of there if it gets worse. I hung up and looked back toward the bridal suite. While they pumped oxygen into the fire of public opinion, I did the one thing they didn't expect. I stayed silent. In the world of social media, silence is a vacuum that people desperately try to fill with more noise. I wanted them to keep talking. I wanted them to lie until they ran out of breath. I wanted them to provide so much evidence of their malice that no lawyer in Washington could save them from the defamation suits. A text appeared on my screen from an encrypted, unknown number. We have the files from his private server. The real ones. Want to buy them before we go to the press. I stared at the screen. I knew exactly what this was. Someone was trying to sell me dirt in the middle of a crisis. It was a bait to see if I would stoop to their level of illegal information gathering. The sharks are in the water, I murmured to Graham, who was standing guard by the glass doors, and they think I'm the one bleeding. I retreated to a small, wood-paneled office in the north wing of the estate, away from the prying eyes of the guests who were still whispering about the torn dress in the chapel. Eli Mercer stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the darkening Seattle sky. Beside him, June Harlow, my lead forensic accountant, had her laptop open, the screen glowing with a frantic lattice of spreadsheets and bank records. It's much deeper than a simple affair. Madeline, Eli said, his voice dropping to a cautious murmur. Grant wasn't just using your joint accounts for dinners and jewelry. He has been using a dummy consulting firm to siphon massive amounts of capital out of the Halston Civic Initiative. The nonprofit I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the one he used to build his public image as a philanthropist. Exactly, June interrupted, her fingers flying over the keys. I tracked a series of invoices for media consulting that were paid out over the last 12 months. Every single payment perfectly matches the dates when Sloane's follower count spiked by 50,000 or 100,000 overnight. He wasn't just buying her love, he was using charitable funds to buy her an audience. He's not working alone, I said, the cold realization settling in my chest. No, Eli replied. The chief financial officer of the entire Halston Group, Warren Halston, has been signing off on these overages. He's Grant's cousin. They've turned the corporate structure into a family piggy bank. It's why Grant was so desperate for that $95,000 wire this morning. He's trying to cover a hole in the project funds before the end-of-year audit. Graham Vale entered the room, his expression unreadable. Grant's laptop is still active on the local network, but he's gone offline. He's holding on to old access tokens. If he decides to dump your private data as a revenge tactic, he'll be leaving a digital fingerprint that proves unauthorized entry. He is walking into a felony. Let him, I said, leaning back into the leather chair. I've already activated the Honey folder in the cloud. It's labeled Carver Trust Offshore. It looks like exactly the kind of secret fund he's been hunting for. But the moment he tries to download or share a single file from it, a tracking script will log his IP address and every destination that data reaches. We've found something else, June said, turning the screen toward me. A bill from a reputation warfare agency based in Florida. They specialize in digital character assassination. The invoice was paid by a company registered under Sloane Whitaker's legal name, and the digital signature on the authorization is hers. She's not just a witness to this. Madeline, she's an active participant in the conspiracy to destroy your name. It's ironic, I murmured. During the divorce proceedings, Grant testified under oath that he had no significant equity or liquid assets. He stood in front of a judge and said he was practically broke. Yet here he is, spending $200,000 on a weekend wedding and millions on bought farms. We have enough to embarrass them, Eli said, leaning in. But embarrassment isn't what you want. Is it? No, I said, looking at the ultrasound photo I had tucked into my notebook. I don't want them to just feel ashamed. I want them to confess. I want them to admit to the financial fraud and the intent to harass me on a recorded line. I want to lock their mouths shut with the weight of the law. If we want them to talk, Eli suggested, we need to make them feel like they've already won. You have to make them believe you're truly terrified of the leaks. I took a long, shaky breath and looked down at my torn dress. I rubbed the smudged mascara beneath my eyes, making myself look a little more haggard, a little more broken. I can do that, I said. I will play the victim. One last time. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Grant. My thumbs hesitated over the glass for a second before I pressed, "Send, I can't take the pressure anymore. I will sign the settlement agreement you wanted. Let's meet privately tonight at the Larkspur Regent. Just you and Sloane. Please, just make the posts stop." Grant's reply came back almost instantly, the arrogance practically vibrating off the screen. Finally, you are being reasonable. 8 o'clock. Don't be late. I looked at Graham and Eli. The trap was set. The wedding was just the opening act. Tonight was the main event. The Larkspur Regent sat like a silent monolith in the heart of downtown Seattle. I had booked the presidential suite, not for its panoramic view of the Sound, but for its specialized private boardroom and the ironclad event contract that allowed for internal security recording. Every inch of the mahogany-paneled room was now under the surveillance of high-definition cameras, all legally justified as part of a high-stakes negotiation involving corporate assets. Eli Mercer handed me the leather-bound folder. Inside was the bait. It was a settlement agreement for $4,800,000 to a man like Grant, who was currently drowning in secret debt and siphoning funds to keep his head above water. That number was a life raft. To a woman like Sloane, who lived for the next designer upgrade, it was the key to a new level of social status. There is one specific clause tucked away in Section 9, Eli said, pointing to a paragraph of dense legal text. It requires them to swear under oath that every piece of media released today was authentic and provided directly by them as a true representation of events. If they sign this, they aren't just taking the money, they are legally confessing to being the primary source of the coordinated harassment campaign. I looked at my reflection in the polished glass of the boardroom table. I had traded my torn cream dress for an oversized, charcoal-colored cashmere sweater that seemed to swallow my pregnant frame. My makeup was intentionally pale, and I had used a touch of gray shadow to create the illusion of deep, dark circles under my eyes. I looked like a woman on the verge of a total nervous collapse. I think I look the part, I said, my voice intentionally soft and brittle, practicing the tremble I would need. I need them to feel powerful. When they walk through that door, I want them to see a broken woman. Graham Vale stepped in from the adjoining room, accompanied by a woman in a sharp navy suit. This was a local assistant district attorney who had been briefed on the financial fraud. Graham had coordinated with her office to ensure that this recording would be categorized as a formal negotiation with legal witnesses present, making every word spoken admissible in a criminal proceeding. "We have the smart pen ready on the table," Graham noted, gesturing to a sleek fountain pen, "and the sensors hidden under the blotter will scan every page the moment the ink hits the paper. Even if Grant tries to grab the document or tear it up in a fit of rage once he realizes the trap, we will already have the digital copies secured on a remote server. I sent one final message to the group chat Grant had used to berate me earlier. I will make a public apology for the wedding incident," I wrote. "I will admit I was confused and that I was the one who caused the scene. Just, please, take down the clips and sign the settlement papers. I am worried about the baby. I can't breathe with all this hate online. I knew Sloane would never be able to resist that. She lived for the public admission of her own superiority. She wouldn't just want the money, she would want my soul on a silver platter." A notification flashed on my screen. Grant had just posted a cryptic update to his 100,000 followers. "The truth comes out at 8 o'clock tonight. Some people will do anything for money, including using an unborn child as a tool for blackmail. Stay tuned for the final chapter." "They are already poisoning the well," Eli said, his jaw tightening as he read the post. "Let them," I replied. I reached into my bag and touched the fabric of the dress Grant had torn at the chapel. I had kept it folded neatly, a jagged piece of evidence of his true nature. I want them to feel like they are the heroes of this story, right until the moment the handcuffs click. Remember, no one touches them. We don't need force. We have the law. I sat down at the head of the table, folding my hands over my belly and waiting. The air in the suite was still, thick with the scent of expensive lilies and the cold, electric hum of the hidden cameras. I was no longer the wife who had been discarded. I was the architect of their downfall, waiting for the wolves to walk into the trap I had built out of their own insatiable greed. Grant and Sloane stepped into the suite at exactly 8 o'clock, moving with the unearned confidence of two people who believed they were walking onto a stage to accept an award. Grant didn't even take off his coat. He just stood there, looking down at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You look absolutely pathetic, Madeline," he sneered, his eyes raking over my oversized sweater and the dark circles I had meticulously painted under my eyes. Sloane didn't even look at me. Her eyes were darting around the room, landing finally on the leather folder in the center of the mahogany table. "Where is the check Grant said there was a settlement for?" $4,800,000. I want to see the numbers." I sank deeper into my chair, making sure my hands trembled as I pulled the folder toward me. I kept my voice low, barely a whisper. I can't take the pressure anymore. The comments, the videos. I just want it to stop. I just want to be left alone with my baby. Please." Grant pulled out a chair and sat across from me, leaning forward like a predator sensing a kill. He took a slow, deep breath, savoring the moment. "You brought this on yourself. Maddie, you tried to play a game you weren't equipped for. Now, here is how this works. You sign the release for every financial claim against the Halston Group, and you drop the audit requests for the construction projects. And the video," Sloane added, her voice sharp as a razor. "I want you to record a statement for my followers. You will admit that you were unstable at the chapel. You will say you tore your own dress to frame us because you couldn't handle the fact that Grant chose me. Once that goes live, I might consider deleting the clips. Will you really make them stop?" I asked, looking up at them with watery eyes. "The accounts in Seattle. The people calling my phone at 3 a.m. Sloane let out a dry, mocking laugh. "Those aren't just people in Seattle. Honey, my team in Miami, they have premium bot packages. They are professionals. Once I pay them to move on to the next target, you'll disappear from the trends. It's just business. I need that money." "Madeline," Grant interrupted, his patience wearing thin. I need to restart things. That civic initiative fund has been like a personal ATM for years, but with your lawyers poking around, the cash flow has dried up. I sign these papers, you get your piece, and I get the capital I need to move on from you. I looked at him, feigning a look of confused hurt. Why are you so sure? Why are you so sure I won't fight back? Grant laughed. A cold, hollow sound. Because you're pregnant. And you're terrified. You've always been soft. You hate being called crazy. And right now, the whole world thinks you're a lunatic. You'll do anything to make it stop. We also know about your little Carver Trust offshore folder. Sloane chimed in, leaning over the table with a smug grin. We saw the balance. Madeline, you've been hiding quite a bit from the divorce court yourself. If you don't sign, we'll make sure the feds see that cloud drive. My heart skipped a beat, but not for the reason they thought. I had never mentioned the name of that folder to anyone. The fact that she knew the exact title was the smoking gun Graham needed. It was proof of illegal hacking into my private cloud. I've already sent a data dump to 3 major news outlets, Grant added, his voice dropping to a threatening growl. It's on a dead man switch. If I don't log in and reset the timer every 12 hours, they get every email and every photo from our marriage. Your reputation will be ashes. Which data dump did you send? Grant? I asked, my voice suddenly losing its tremble. The one with the photos or the one with your financial logs? Grant didn't catch the shift in my tone. He was too busy reaching for the smart pen, the one that ruins you. Now, sign the damn papers. I pushed the document toward them. They both grabbed the pen, signing their names with a flourish. Barely glancing at the text, they believed they were smarter than the paper. They believed their arrogance was a shield. The moment the last stroke of Grant's signature hit the page, I sat up straight. The exhaustion vanished from my face, and the watery look in my eyes turned into a stare of pure, chilling ice. Thank you, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a winter wind. You both just signed a sworn affidavit. Section 9, which you didn't read, explicitly states that you are the sole sources of the media released today, and that you admit to the use of bot farms and the unauthorized access of my private servers. You just confessed to everything. Grant's face went pale. What? What are you talking about? I looked toward the heavy oak door leading to the adjoining suite. You can come in now. The door swung open, and the assistant district attorney walked in, followed by Eli Mercer and 2 uniformed officers. The look of triumph on Grant and Sloane's faces didn't just fade, it shattered. The assistant district attorney stepped into the light, her badge gleaming against the dark wood of the suite. Mr. Halston, Ms. Whitaker, you are being notified that this meeting has been recorded under legal supervision. You have the right to remain silent. Grant's face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of gray. Sloane began to hyperventilate, her hands trembling so violently that her phone slipped from her fingers. Wait, please. This is a mistake, Sloane stammered, her voice thin and high-pitched. I was just making content. It's for the fans. It's all just theater. Grant didn't beg. He lunged across the table, his fingers clawing for the leather folder, but Eli Mercer was faster. Eli pulled the documents back, a calm, mocking smile on his face. Don't bother. Grant, Eli said. The smart pen already uploaded the digital copies to 3 secure servers the second you finished the last stroke of your name. The originals are just paper now. Grant's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. He pulled his own phone from his pocket, his thumb hovering over a red icon on his screen. Fine. If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me. The data dump goes live. Now. He pressed the button with a triumphant snarl. He thought he had just sent my private life to every major news outlet in the Pacific Northwest. He thought he had won. "Follow me," I said, my voice cold and steady. I led them down the grand staircase to the hotel's secondary ballroom, which I had booked for a small press conference. Because Grant had spent the last 2 hours leaking big news to his media contacts to prepare for my downfall, the room was already packed. Local reporters and streamers were holding their cameras high, waiting for the kill. I walked onto the small stage, Graham Vale standing directly behind me. I didn't need a script. I gestured to the large projector screen behind me. "I have 3 things to show you," I told the room. First, I played the raw, unedited footage from the Cascadia Glass Chapel. It showed the timestamp 4:15 p.m. It showed Grant deliberately reaching out, his face set in a malicious grin, and ripping my dress. There was no accident. There was only calculated cruelty. Second, I displayed the logs from the Florida agency evidence of $85,000 spent on bot packages and coordinated harassment, all paid for by Sloane Whitaker's lifestyle brand. Finally, I showed the signature page of the agreement they had just signed 10 minutes ago, where they admitted under oath to being the source of every lie told today. The room erupted. The streamers who had been mocking me minutes ago suddenly went silent, their comment sections turning into a tidal wave of outrage against Grant and Sloane. I watched as the Madeline Carver-obsessed hashtag began to vanish, replaced by Cancel Grant Halston. Sloane stepped onto the stage, her eyes wide and tearful, trying to find a camera to charm. "I was manipulated," she cried, her voice cracking. I didn't know he was using me. I'm just a woman in love. Please?" The hotel's event manager stepped forward, holding a tablet. "Actually, Ms. Whitaker, the security logs show you were present for every planning meeting regarding the accidental dress tear. You also authorized the damaging of venue property. The contract is void, and the Halston Group is liable for all damages." Grant stood at the back of the room, his tuxedo disheveled, shouting over the noise of the crowd, "You're a liar. You set me up. This is a trap. You're a fake, a fraud. I didn't set a trap." "Grant," I said, looking at him through the lens of a dozen cameras, "I just gave you a pen and let you, finally, tell the truth." Then came the real blow. "The data dump you just activated," I continued. "It wasn't my private files. You spent the last hour downloading the contents of the Carver Trust Honey folder. Those files contain the full transaction history of the Halston Civic Initiative. Every cent you stole, every bribe you paid, and every illegal access Sloane made to my cloud servers is currently being emailed to the district attorney's office and every major newspaper in the country." The reporters turned their microphones toward the back of the room. "Grant, is it true? Warren Halston helped you siphon $5 million? Grant, look here." The dominoes were falling. I could see the career Grant had built on lies crumbling in real time. But as the police moved in to escort them out for questioning, Grant stopped. He turned back, his face twisted with a final desperate venom. He grabbed a reporter's microphone and screamed loud enough to silence the entire ballroom. "You think you won because you're carrying a Halston heir," he spat, his voice shaking with rage. "Tell the world, Madeline. Tell them who the father really is, because it isn't me. Prove the baby is mine. Or admit you're just a lying, unfaithful gold digger." The room went deathly silent. Every camera lens turned back to me, waiting for the answer to the final jagged knot in the story. Grant's voice tore through the silence of the ballroom, raw and jagged with a desperation that bordered on insanity. Every camera in the room remained fixed on me, the red tally lights glowing like predatory eyes. He wanted to turn my body, my child, and my dignity into a final piece of tabloid trash. He wanted to sow a seed of doubt that would follow me for the rest of my life. You think you can just stand there with that belly and play the St. Grant screamed, spittle flying from his lips, Tell them, Madeline, tell them you're just using that kid to extort me. You've been sleeping around since the day I left who is the father. Really, because it sure as hell isn't a Halston. The room held its breath. I felt the sharp, sudden sting of tears behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a breakdown. I didn't need to scream because I had already built a wall of steel around my life. I won't be debating my medical history or my child's lineage with a man who is currently being investigated for 5 different felonies. I said, my voice projecting with a terrifying, quiet clarity. Eli Mercer stepped forward, tapping a command on his tablet. The large projector screen behind me changed. It wasn't a bank statement this time. It was a court-sealed protective order. Earlier this morning, we filed a comprehensive medical privacy injunction. Eli informed the gathered press, under Washington law, any further public speculation or disparaging remarks regarding Ms. Carver's pregnancy or health care will be treated as aggravated harassment. A chime echoed through the ballroom speakers. A video call appeared on the screen. It was Dr. Hannah Pierce, sitting in her white-walled office. I am Dr. Hannah Pierce, she said, her professional tone cutting through the tension. I have been Madeline's primary physician for over 3 years. I can confirm that her pregnancy is stable, but the psychological warfare she has been subjected to today is unacceptable. My office is prepared to provide all necessary evidence to the district attorney regarding the stress-induced risks Grant Halston has intentionally created. Grant laughed. A high, frantic sound. You're all in on it. It's a scam. She's a gold digger, Grant. Eli interrupted, his voice like a gavel strike. Do you remember Section 4 of your final divorce decree? The non-disparagement clause you signed to protect your own precious image, it explicitly forbids the exploitation of Madeline's private health or personal life for media gain. You just violated that clause on a live broadcast to over 2 million people. That mistake just triggered an automatic $1 million liquidated damages penalty and the immediate forfeiture of your remaining corporate shares to the Carver Atlas Trust. The assistant district attorney stepped forward. Her face a mask of iron. Grant Halston, based on the evidence of extortion, unauthorized data access, the siphoning of $95,000 from the Halston Civic Initiative this morning, and the intentional destruction of property at the Astor Hollow estate. You are being taken into custody. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the loudest noise in the room. Sloane let out a piercing shriek, clutching at the ADA's arm. It was him. I didn't know. He told me she was the one hacking us. I was just trying to protect my brand. You signed the affidavit 10 minutes ago. Sloane, I said, looking at her with nothing but cold pity. You admitted to buying the bots. You admitted to the cloud access. You can't wash your hands when you're the one who bought the soap. Grant struggled against the officers, trying to lunge toward me one last time. His face was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. You think you're better than me. You're nothing without my name. Graham Vale stepped into the gap, moving only half a step, but his massive frame was an impenetrable barrier. Grant stopped, his chest heaving, his eyes darting toward the exits that were now blocked by law enforcement. I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at the man I had once loved. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't even feel the need for an apology. I felt free. You ripped my dress at that altar to make me feel small. Grant, I said, the words falling like stones into a deep well. You wanted everyone to see me as a victim, but you forgot one thing. I don't need a piece of lace to cover my power. You built your life on filters and stolen money. I built mine on the truth. Enjoy the silence of your new home. The police led them out through the side doors, the cameras following their every shameful step. The wedding of the year had become the crime scene of the century. I walked out of the Larkspur Regent a few minutes later, refusing the offer of a security escort to my car. I wanted to feel the cold, sharp bite of the Seattle night air on my skin. The city lights blurred in the distance, and the distant roar of the media grew fainter with every step I took. I placed my hand on my belly, feeling the quiet, steady life within. You won't grow up in the shadow of a man who likes to humiliate people, I whispered into the dark, because I closed the door on that darkness today. Thank you for listening to this story. Please let us know in the comments where you are listening from so we can connect and share our thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Mia Revenge Stories, like this video, and support us by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.